Hello and welcome to the Exam Study Experts podcast. Today's episode is a special double bill on the theme of purpose and vision in your studying. Knowing your purpose and connecting with your vision and using that to translate good intentions into consistent action. This is all really critical stuff as we look to get consistent and stay consistent in our study habits. The two guests I've brought together for today's episodes are each passionate about different aspects of this question. We're going to hear from Steve Gamlin, who's a really inspirational speaker I think you'll really enjoy, who's refined and popularized a strategy for creating vision boards and using that to drive consistent action. It's about creating the vision for your compelling future through your current academic goals and what that's going to lead to, and then translating that vision into the steps you'll take to make that a reality. First, though, we're going to be hearing from purpose expert Ian Chamandy, who joins us to unpack the value of having a really clear purpose as a scholar. So what is your big why? Let's take a look.
Hi there, my name is Ian Chamandy, and I'm the Chief Purpose Officer of Purpose U, which is like Purpose University. And I have created a system whereby companies and individuals can create clarity about their future by, first of all, defining what makes them uniquely remarkable in 7 words or less, and then having that guide everything they do and say. And that 7 words or less that defines what makes you uniquely remarkable, that's your purpose. As Picasso said, your purpose in life is to find your gift, that thing that makes you uniquely remarkable, and share it with the world.
Fantastic. Well, it's a really interesting topic. I'm excited to get into the conversation and explore more about your expertise on purpose. It's often helpful to start with a definition. So maybe we can start there. What, Ian, is purpose?
Actually, that is the place to start. I'm glad you recognize that. And I say that because of my frustration with the purpose industry. Anywhere you read in articles, business magazines, or in wellness magazines about purpose, they talk about everything except what it actually is. And so what that does is it leaves people kind of flummoxed with, oh, that's a wonderful concept, and it's, and it makes it appear woo-woo, when in fact, it's actually very simple and it's very tangible in its benefit. So I'll harken back what I said in my introduction. Picasso has a famous quote: "The meaning of life is to find your gift, and your purpose is to share it with the world." So I just reframed that to make it simpler, which is your purpose is to find your gift and share it with the world. Well, what Purpose U does is it helps you discover that one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable. And that's just a different way of saying your gift. So really, your purpose is to discover that one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable and share it with the world. And at the end of the day, what you're saying is figure out who you are so that you can then intentionally be the best possible you can possibly be. And that's the best gift that you, as an individual, can give to the world.
So it's an inspiring message. Tell us a little bit more about the benefits that flow from that. So what are some of the things that you see either in, real life stories or in terms of the science? What are kind of some of the big whys about why you consider it so helpful to find our purpose as individuals?
Sure. Well, there's a whole laundry list, but there's 2 that I usually focus on. And, I'm glad you asked that question because this actually is going to explain the tangibility, the real tangible value of purpose, as opposed to, some woo-woo concept about fulfillment and that sort of thing. The 2 really big things that you get from purpose, because it is the articulation of what makes you uniquely remarkable as a human being, for the first time, you're going to know your superpower. And I have this belief that well over half the people in the world are walking around thinking that there's nothing special about them, and therefore they deserve nothing special, and they can accomplish nothing special. And I'm here to tell you that as long as there is not a single person on the planet who is precisely the same as you, then you have something that makes you uniquely remarkable. So when you discover what that is, you go, oh God, I've got a superpower. I've got this magic that I am able to do, and nobody can ever take that away from me. So the first benefit is that it elevates your confidence. And even when you're in a situation where, there's all sorts of drama in your life and you're feeling anxiety and stress and maybe even fear, nobody can take that away from you. The fact that you actually have a superpower, so you have value. And then the second thing is related to that, which is when you're in that state where you are experiencing what we call a trigger event. So for instance, career change. There's 3 ways it can happen, right? You can choose to change your job, you can be laid off, or you can be fired. And any one of those, even the one where you decide to change your career, that's a trigger event because it creates uncertainty about your future. And although you're willingly going out to get another job, you don't know if you're going to like that job, if you're going to like that company, if you're going to fit in with the people, if they're going to see your value. So there are all these unanswered questions, right? So this is how a trigger event works. Trigger event happens. It creates uncertainty about the future. And then that uncertainty causes anxiety and in the extreme fear. So when you know your purpose, that one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable, that becomes a decision-making tool for you. So that when you face important decisions, you're not just saying, oh, what should I do? You're actually saying, which one of these choices more closely aligns with that one thing that makes me uniquely remarkable, with my purpose? And when you make a decision that is aligned with your purpose, you're making a decision that is better aligned with you and who you are and what you want from life.
Of course, you talked about triggering events being kind of career changes, getting fired, laid off, whatever. Of course, many of our listeners are young people at school, university, and for them, they may be looking at beginning a career. They haven't had the time yet to kind of establish themselves in the professional world, but there's kind of still presumably some seeds of, this could be my superpower. This is kind of what I'm good at. This is what I do really well. Yeah. Any kind of examples that could be relevant to kind of that stage of life, if that makes sense.
Well, where this all came from is when I was in university, there was a book that I really wanted to read, but it was so thick and dense that I knew that I was never, it's going to put me to sleep after 3 paragraphs every time I pick it up. But there was a philosophy course that was on the book. Not the book was the textbook for the course. The course was on the book. The book is called Gödel, Escher, and Bach. And Gödel was the German mathematician who came up with, a theorem that just didn't just explode math, it exploded life. Escher is the optical illusion artist that we all had hanging in our university dorms. And Bach is the guy, he's written some catchy tunes. And this guy described those 3 as they're 3 shadows cast from the same stone. And the book attempted to define the stone. And because of what I had to do in that course, the project that I had to do, the teaching I had to do, it made me realize that I could understand absolutely anything at the logic level. Not deep, but at the logic level, I could understand anything. And so in 1981, at the dawn of DNA, the paper I wrote for the course was basically a layman's guide to DNA. And I was able to understand that and explain the logic of it, not the science of it underneath. And that gave me a confidence that has carried me through my whole life. Just the realization that I can understand anything at the logic level. And so that's transforming confusion into clarity. That was my purpose. And it sprung out of that because I had to take a complex book and make it simple. I had to take a complex field of new study, DNA, and make a DNA for Dummies paper.
Yeah. It's really interesting.
There is a relevance, especially to university graduates, in finding your purpose and helping you build a career. So I don't know how much you want to hear this as a university graduate, But that really is the transition from being a youth to being an adult, right? Because the whole time you're in school, you're sort of cloistered in this protective little bubble, and then when you leave school, man, you're on your own now. It's sink or swim. You got to get a job. You got to pay for your place. You got to pay for your food to keep yourself alive. So now you've got to learn how to be an adult. So that's one thing. The other thing is that you got to know that the process of, if I am hiring, this is what the resume review process looks like. I got a stack of resumes on my desk like this. And I go, no, no, no. Oh, yes. And that's how much time I give each one. Quick scan. Does it go in the no pile or does it go in the yes pile? So when my scan is between 5 and 10 seconds, you better have something on that page that jumps out and says, pick me. And the reality is that 99% of resumes don't do that at all. So, at the top of a resume where you've got your contact information at the top, and then underneath that, people put that insipid statement that is, oh, I want to work for a company that brings out all my, my skills, that gives me fulfillment, and where I can have a sense of meaning and purpose while I'm working for this company. Every single one of those resumes says something to that effect in that area. Well, if you could identify, if you, on graduation, could articulate that one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable in 7 words or less, and then explain that in a clear, concise, and compelling way, then your resume is going to jump out. Because the first thing it's going to say, Ian Chamandy, and you can reach me here and phone me here. And then it's going to say, my secret superpower is transforming confusion into clarity. And here's what that means. When people are faced with really difficult situations, often they have many unanswered questions in their heads, and that causes confusion, causes anxiety, and sometimes even fear. When those questions get answered, you have clarity about the future. You know what to do, and you have confidence in what you're doing. Well, I help people transform that confusion into clarity by breaking their problems down and making them simpler and easier to solve. Right? So that was my purpose statement and 3 sentences underneath to support it. And if you're in a business where you need that kind of person, you're going to look at that resume and you're going to say, keep her. And if you don't need that kind of person, you're going to say, wow, that's interesting, but we don't need that here. So it works both ways, right? You don't want to be called in for an interview for a job where your talent is not valued. But that, if you're able to put something as substantive in that spot, it's what makes you uniquely remarkable, and with a clear, concise, and compelling explanation of what that means, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb as you compete with all those other graduates for the plum jobs. So that's why knowing your purpose is so important when you're a graduate. There's lots of other benefits in your personal life as well. But when you come out of school, you're usually wanting to get a job, and you're wanting to get that job. And nothing will position you better for that than being able to lead with your purpose, that one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable.
That's really interesting. I wonder if you could just sort of expand a little bit on this idea of using your kind of purpose and kind of uncovering this idea of what you're good at, what your sort of emerging superpowers might be as a young person and a scholar. Like, how can you use that, as you talking about earlier about purpose as a decision making tool? Do you have any thoughts on how we might be able to use kind of understanding of your purpose as a tool for kind of choosing the most appropriate things to study, the most appropriate courses, the most appropriate route through your academic life?
Well, just to, pick up on what we just talked about, when I was in university, up until that point, I was a rock solid C- student. I was not good at academics. But what that taught me is that I could like I said, understand anything at the logic level. And that gave me a confidence going forward in that. So I had to say, okay, what kind of courses are going to allow me to take complex ideas and explain them? I can explain, right? And so what that drove me into was courses where the mark was predominantly from papers, not from studying and figuring out formula and that sort of thing. And then what it also did is that when I started writing those papers, I could predict what my mark was. And it was always somewhere, I don't mean to brag, but it was always somewhere in the A range. And I was even able to, when I got on an A paper once, I went back to the prof and I said, this is why it should be an A plus. And he said, yeah, you're right, and gave me an A plus. So I just had that confidence that I could go into, providing I picked courses that fit who I am, that I could go into those courses. And that's how I transformed myself from a solid C minus student to a straight A student.
Yeah.
And I didn't know any of this early enough in my university career to actually direct my academic study. But I would have loved to have known it sooner, so that could have affected all of my decisions throughout my academic career. And then who knows, it might have, I just fell into careers. And to be honest with you, I've had 5 careers, totally different careers, and I fell into each one of them. And if I had to do it all over again, and school was the same thing, right? When I was in my last year of high school and I went and visited a university, I picked my major because I liked a poster.
Right.
Didn't know how else to do it. And I flunked out of that major. So I would have loved to have had something that gave me some grounding and some direction to say, does this fit who I am? Does this fit who I am? Does this fit who I am? And I never had that.
Yeah, you're right. And I see so many people making choices, me included, for all of these quite, superficial reasons. And it sounds silly when you articulate it so clearly, but, the power of aligning what you are pursuing with what you're good at. I mean, it sounds so obvious when you put it that way, but it's not something I think a lot of people think as deeply about as they should. And there's this huge ground in doing it.
And it's actually even deeper than that, William. It's not just aligning what you do with what you're good at. So you're aligning what you do with what you're good at, your superpower articulated in 7 words or less. But the components of your superpower are your beliefs. You've got a whole set of beliefs, your wants, what you want in life, and your talents, whether you're born with them or you develop them along the way. But those 3 categories of qualities of you, your beliefs, your wants, and your talents, it's your unique combination of those 3 things that make you uniquely remarkable. That's what makes you you. So those are the components of your purpose. So when you're making a decision about a major or about how you want to study or what direction you want to go in, when you make that decision aligned with your purpose, you're really making it in alignment with your beliefs, your wants, and your talents. And that's why it's such a good decision when it's aligned with your purpose, because it really is aligned with who you are at a deep level.
One thing I was wanting to ask you, Ian, is my observation is that there's sometimes a trade-off between making a decision in line with your purpose versus making a decision that's, should we say, practical or pragmatic, whether that's choosing a university course of study or whether that's choosing a career path. And, sometimes there's a sense that, people might feel, well, maybe my purpose or my kind of wants are, quite altruistic or kind of to serve. And just to take an example, maybe that's kind of a calling in the direction of, non-profit sector, where the sort of practical reality might be, not quite so good on the sort of financial front, and you might struggle from a sort of personal finance perspective. That would be a kind of a classic example. I wonder if you just sort of comment on that perceived trade-off. I mean, do you see it as a trade-off? What are your thoughts on this particular issue?
So I'll go back to purpose as a decision-making tool, right? So when you do an evaluation, let's say you've got 2 choices. You do an evaluation and you say option A is more aligned with my purpose. You're not forced to choose option A.
Right.
You can still choose option B, but you're going to be choosing option B with the full knowledge that option A technically is a better choice, right? So that's better. Choosing option B with the full knowledge that option A may be the better choice is a better way to make decisions than not realizing option A is the better choice, right? So that's one thing. The other thing I'll say, and it goes back to what I was saying about this book, right? Where the author described Gödel, Escher, and Bach, three people, as three different shadows cast from the same stone. Well, think of your purpose as that stone, and everything in your life is just a shadow cast from that stone. So the practical realities of your life should align with your purpose, because you're always using your purpose. It's always front of mind, and you're always using it to help you make decisions. So that shouldn't happen, right? That the practical realities. And, an element of your purpose is not going to be, I want to be a billionaire or I want to be a millionaire, right? So, whether you're making a lot of money in what you do or not make a lot of money is probably not going to be relevant to your purpose. But what you're actually doing when you make that lots or little bit of money has to feed your soul.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, some people I think look at the choice, I've made to do what I do for a living, 7 years back or so now, going full time with the Exam Study Expert. And, I had a very high flying corporate career before that. And, what I do now is absolutely much better aligned with my purpose. It's not to say I didn't enjoy my corporate work. I did. I was good at it. Had good work. It was interesting. It was intellectual. It was good work. But
this is what feeds your soul.
The kind of sense of purpose I get from, right. And it means, my paycheck is much smaller than it used to be, but I can't think about sort of going back on that decision. It was a brave decision to make. Though,
absolutely.
For me, it required quite a lot of boldness and quite a lot of sacrifice for a good 2-3 years while I was building it. So, perhaps pursuing purpose doesn't always come easy.
Well, here's the question I would, it's a rhetorical question that I would have is, how many people are not making the decision that you made because they can't give themselves the permission to do that, right? You did make a courageous leap, but there are lots of people who don't, and this is no knock on them. They don't have that courage yet. But when you know your superpower, right, then you have that courage, then you have that confidence, and you can start making courageous decisions in your life. Like I'm going to take a step back and accept less pay because I know that pursuing this fits with my beliefs, wants, and talents better, and it's going to feed my soul.
Good. Well, Ian, really interesting stuff. If we are feeling motivated to do more to explore and kind of uncover that inner purpose and understand ourselves a little bit better in that dimension, where could we go next?
Okay, so you go to Purpose U. That's like Purpose University, purposeu.ai. And if you choose to take the course, then I take you on a step-by-step process. It takes about 6 hours. You can do it over a bunch of days. And where you watch a video of me giving you detailed information, watch a video, do an exercise, watch a video, do an exercise. When you're over here doing an exercise, we have a special all things about purpose AI bot. We call it Wordsmith. So as you're taking the course, there's 2 people holding your hands, sitting on either side of you, helping you. Me, by guiding you with these videos, and Wordsmith, where anytime you need help either finding the right words or looking at a whole bunch of data and seeing things that you can't see. Well, that's what Wordsmith is great at. So you take that course, you'll define your purpose in 7 words or less. You'll design the story around it, and you'll begin to learn how to live a life of meaning and purpose.
Fantastic. Well, I'm feeling excited to go and discover more about my purpose myself. Ian, thank you so much for today. It's been a really interesting conversation. Thank you so much. And we'll talk again soon, hopefully.
Great. Thank you very much, William.
Well, thanks again, Ian. It was great to talk to you, and I hope you've got some really good insight on how to clearly articulate your purpose. And having done so, I think it may be a really great next step to spend some time visualizing the positive outcomes and what that purpose will lead to, why you're doing all this, and what the vision for the future out the other side of your current academic goal will look like. Here's Steve Gamlin on how to use a vision board to get and stay inspired in your studies.
My name is Steve Gamlin. I have enjoyed the past 22 years now as a professional speaker, talking about visualization, positivity, back to basics motivation. My life prior to that, I was in the radio industry for 10 years, stand-up comedian for 7 years, and in between all the highs and the lows, I've gotten to live all the dreams I had when I was 11 years old to be a radio DJ, a stand-up comic, an author of my own books, and a teacher of people. And here we are.
Phenomenal. Well, we're excited to learn today, Steve. So I think one of the things I was most excited to talk to you about was your approach to the vision board strategy and using that to help us kind of find our purpose and motivation, etc. So before we kind of hopefully get into the nuts and bolts of kind of what the strategy is and how we can use it, perhaps just give us a little bit of a flavor of why you feel this is such a helpful technique for people to know about, and why it's something you're kind of excited to share with people. What's the big win for people in using the approach?
The biggest win for people, to me, and everything I'm all about, is to help them become the best version of themselves. And so many people these days are being swayed and blinded by all of the bling they see on social media. These people who are out there saying, if you want to be successful, this is what you have to do. And they put up this very fictional wall of what their lives are really like. And I think too many people fall for that. And then they feel as though they're falling short in their own lives because their lives aren't similar to this image that's being projected out there as perfection, as success, as happiness, as all of these things. What I try to do is help people take a good, hard, honest, from the gut look at where their life is right now. And not just in regards to money and material things, but I work in 8 areas of life using a life wheel, which is a pretty standard tool in personal development. Understand where you are now and start to create a vision of where you want your life to be just 1 year from now. Don't give me the 20-year thing because you're going to scare the heck out of yourself and probably stop. 1 year from today. Start to see it, feel it. What will it sound like, smell like, taste like? Create the story for it, and then to start realizing the little baby steps you have to take on a regular basis to get there.
Well, let's dig into the details in a second. I'm just curious, I mean, whether from your own life or from people you've helped along the way, I'm just curious if you've got any kind of interesting stories of people who've applied the idea and kind of what's happened to them 1 year later.
Yeah. One of my dearest friends and clients is a woman named Lori. And Lori has ADHD, ADD. I mean, she is way out there with regard to the pace that her brain is racing all day long. And she started working with me about 3 years ago. And she said, one of the things I want to do is build a space where I can record my podcast, someplace where I'm actually comfortable, because the room she was recording in was just adding to her stress and her nerves and her mind racing. And so we sat on a call and I said, what would you like it to look like, feel like, sound like, smell like, taste like? And she said, well, I want it to be colorful because I'm colorful. I want it to be fun because I'm fun. I want it to be these amazing textures that to help reduce my stress and anxiety before a call, I can actually touch the walls. And I said, well, okay, you can do all of this and find colors that reflect who you are and how you feel and what your mind is like when you're in this room so that you can actually harness it, be comfortable there. And over the course of 1 weekend, she and her husband went to a craft store, found several different fabrics, including some vividly bright colors. And within a week, they had taken one of their, I believe it had started as a walk-in closet, and built her recording studio where she has done more than 160 podcast episodes so far. And every once in a while, she'll send me a picture with her hand on the wall of the bright pink, I mean, neon hot pink, furry wall. And she has another wall with zebra stripes or leopard spots or something on it. And she said, every time I go in there, I get to be me. And all of the stress and the distraction goes away when she's in there. So that's one of my favorites because she created this amazing space for herself. Not that she's denying her physical or mental or emotional conditions. She found a place to call home that she's very comfortable in. And she's just, at the time, she'd only done 3 episodes of her podcast, and now she's on her way to 200.
Fantastic. Well, we may be pretty close to 200 there or thereabouts when this one goes out, Steve. So it's a great milestone for her to get to. you've teased me very nicely there because we were chatting just before we hit record. This is the first time recording the Exam Study Expert podcast, our very first interview. It might not be the first one that actually broadcasts, but it's at time of recording. It's the first time I've recorded an episode in our brand new little recording studio. So exciting moment for us too. I know how she feels. So, I mean, I'm curious, thinking about our kind of typical listener who is preparing for exams towards the end of high school, perhaps, or as part of their university journey, or we have a lot of professionals listening as well, taking professional certifications to kind of move to the next step in their career. How do you see kind of the concept of a vision board supporting the journey of someone who is either trying to get consistent or trying to manage their emotions and the stress of preparing for a big set of exams, and perhaps thinking about what's on the other side and building out your vision for life beyond? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, this actually plays perfectly into the 8 spokes of the life wheel. And now they include the areas of your life such as physical health, your emotional well-being, your closest relationships, the core values that guide everything you think, speak, and do, kind of your internal rules, your faith, if that's an important part of your life, which does the same, but the authority comes from a different direction, your connection to people in a real way. And boy, didn't that take a beating a few years ago during the pandemic with all the isolation and depression and loneliness and addiction that happened. And then your career and your money, your material wealth. So all of these things need to be a part of it. You've got a student who right now is either going to graduate to get a certificate or a degree, or somebody who is engaging and improving their workplace skills to rise up somewhere in the chart. What I recommend you do is understand the value. It's not just a grade you're getting. It's a little click up the first hill of an old wooden roller coaster, because I love to use that analogy. Click, 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 click. The life you wish to enjoy and the best version of yourself is at the top of that first hill. So every exam you have, every course you take, every conversation with a professor, every time you reach out, maybe if you're struggling a little bit, everything you do is so important, because that little click today is going to help you to get to that future great job, great degree, amazing career, better earning potential, better relationships with the people you're working with, because you're all part of a shared vision for not only for a company to be successful, but for each person inside it to be very personally successful and be invested in their journey. So please don't think of it as just another exam or just another test or just another class or a course. Everything you're doing right now, please take it seriously enough to know that it is part of the story of your complete life. And it's not a one and done. It's a long journey clicking up that first hill. But when you get there and you look over your shoulder before you go over the top to enjoy the ride, you couldn't stop if you tried. Look over your shoulder once in a while and realize how far you've come, because you've taken all the steps, because you've developed the study habits, because you are surrounding yourself with the best people. Nobody wants to be on a ride where somebody is complaining the whole way up, because that's going to ruin your celebration. So please understand, it's part of such a bigger picture to take it seriously enough to put your best efforts into each and every one, knowing that it's going to get you to the top of that hill, whatever success looks like for you.
Fantastic. So you mentioned those kind of 8 spokes of the wheel. Tell us how we go about, what is a vision board, and how do we go about starting to make one for ourselves?
To me, a vision board, and somebody asked me one time in an interview just like this in a conversation, they said, "What's a vision board?" And it just fell out. I said, "It's a well-mounted GPS for the rest and the best of your life." And they said, "Oh, I like that." I said, "Yeah, me too. Let me write that down." So I've been using that ever since. And it includes all 8 areas of your life, because even though it may feel overwhelming, what I encourage people to do is either create or find. You could use old, magazines, or the internet is an amazing place for this. And with AI, you can create the most personalized pictures ever. Think of the best version of your life, even, like I said, just 1 year from today, in each of those areas of your life. Just even one goal for each area: physical health, emotional well-being, relationships, core values, faith, connection, career, and money, finances. Because what most people don't realize is all 8 of those areas are working together 24/7. You improve one, you stand the chance of improving them all. So please see the big picture here. Don't do what I call the vision board starter kit, which I see all the time: a Lamborghini, a yacht, a private jet, a mansion, a big honking gold watch, and a bank vault full of gold bars. That's wonderful. There's nothing wrong with any of those things. But who do you want to become? To me, it's just as important, if not more so, who you become versus just what you get. So if you want to be happy, wonderful. Put the word happy or hashtag happy or create a mantra or something to put where you can see it each day. Now, many of the boards I've started with are maybe 11 by 17 or 14 by 17. You get a little piece of foam board or cork board at an arts and crafts store or an office supply store. Whatever's most important to you, I suggest, now everything I say is just what's worked for me over the past 23 years, building my life from complete devastation and destruction to where it is today. Whatever's most important to you, start that in the center. And you'll realize as you're creating this full picture, which ones are going to be closest to that and most closely tied to it. And if you work on them, will enable that to happen. For example, if you need to improve your physical health, you exercise a bit, you eat better foods, you do less of the bad things, you drink more water, you get better sleep at night. When you wake up, you have more energy and focus. When you have more energy and focus, you can do your job or your studying more effectively. When you do that, you get better grades, you get a promotion at work, you get to maybe earn more money. When you earn more money, you can buy back a little time and freedom, spend time with the people in the relationships closer to you. If you do it all in alignment with your core values, you never have to look over your shoulder. You feel better emotions on a regular basis, and you make better connections with people. All of those wins because you decided to take better care of your physical health. So be aware that to set goals in each of these areas can actually improve your entire life over time.
It's all interrelated. I've got two personas of different kinds of listener in my mind as you're describing all this, Steve. And I think one of them is perhaps true of at least some, definitely not all, but at least some of our kind of younger listeners who haven't quite yet kind of built that kind of conscientious, consistent study habit muscle that tends, again, not always, but kind of tends to develop as we mature as adults and scholars. And kind of when we're in that space of, we've got perhaps a few good intentions about doing well in our exams, but kind of we're struggling to harness that and channel that into consistent action. I'm really seeing how kind of having this vision for your future, at that stage, you're still a young person, you've got your whole adult life ahead of you, really interesting, I think, to think about, okay, well, what do you want this to look like in the different areas? And I think it was a great prompt you gave people. Don't just think about the house and the car and the watch, think about your relationships, think about your relationship with God or kind of whatever your spiritual beliefs are, thinking about what you want your physical health to look like, kind of the full kind of holistic picture and kind of who you want to be at the center of it all. I think that's really compelling. And then I think the other sort of listener image that kind of popped into my mind is perhaps one of our sort of slightly older listeners. Maybe they're a professional, maybe in kind of a medical field, and maybe they're in a situation where they've taken an exam once before, twice before, even 3 times before, and they're getting a little bit disillusioned. And I think one thing that this strategy gives back is maybe that sense of kind of hope and kind of seeing what's on the other side of getting over the hurdle, and the kind of financial benefits, the benefits for their relationships and their family. They can spend more time with their family because they don't have to study the whole time because they've got the exam done. All those kind of things. This is really, really interesting. You mentioned a couple of watch outs already. So we kind of make sure we get the 8 areas. We make sure we think about who you want to be. I thought it was an interesting frame you talked about, make it 1 year out. Kind of don't make it too pie in the sky and think about 3 decades. Like, let's look 1 year into the future. Are there any other little ideas that you kind of suggest people bear in mind, things to watch out for as you're putting these things together?
Most definitely. If it helps right on the vision board, because I've done this over time, if it's a goal that you're looking up right now and you're thinking, oh, it's too far away. Oh, I don't know if I'm good enough for that. Well, maybe my habits won't get me there. Create a way to track your progress, because that's a really important thing to do, especially when things might seem a bit overwhelming. It's like the person who wakes up on New Year's Day and says, oh my gosh, I got to lose 50 pounds this year. Now, how many people do that? A lot. How many people get past the 2nd or 3rd week of January and don't go to the gym anymore and don't make good food choices? A lot, because 50 pounds is very overwhelming. But if you just put up even a little thermometer, like we see these businesses that do fundraising events, they have a giant picture of a thermometer and they gauge the progress. And when they reach that top, just a little at a time, big celebration at the top. So if you think about how you can break down your goals and start to track your progress, that's a really good thing to have on a vision board, because you get to periodically, when you achieve the next little increment of a win, you get to mark it off. And I've been we've had a Peloton cycle here at our house for almost 3.5 years. And the first year I said, well, I want to just do, 2,000 miles. I wound up doing 2,400 at the end because I wasn't adding it along the way. The second year I said, I want to do 3,000. So I created a thermometer, and every time I reached another 100, I colored it in, and I would take a video of it and send it to my vision board clients, and they would love it because it encouraged them and reminded them, celebrate the little wins along the way. It's not just between Christmas and New Year's, look back and go, well, I guess I should see if I actually achieved my goal this year. Well, you know what I'll do? What most people do. I'll just change the date at the top and go, hey, there's my goal for next year now, without coming up with a way to actually cheer yourself on along the way and celebrate the fact that you're developing, you're hardwiring the better habits, you're doing the work, you're getting there. Maybe you fall a little bit short. It's still a lot better than you would have been had you not started, or had you not created a way to just celebrate those first few turns of a rusty wheel that maybe hasn't rolled in about 10 years. So that's the biggest one, is to create ways along the way you can pat yourself on the back a little bit and say, okay, I'm going in the right direction. I'm celebrating. I'm feeling good. I'm excited. I'm starting to see these little wins. So let's keep going, growing, and showing up.
Create the compelling vision. You have the images for kind of how life wants to be a year from now in those 8 areas, and then you sort of translate that into, okay, how can I come up with a goal? Maybe you focus in on the thing that maybe is kind of the bit that you most want to make progress in, but as you said, kind of doubling down on making progress in that bit of the 8, can unlock progress in all of them. And as you're describing, you kind of have a way of tracking, maybe visualizing the progress you're making and celebrating those little wins along the way. No, I think that's really good. I think one thing that I've sort of been curious about as you were talking, I can kind of have a vision of a vision board in my mind's eye, but I wonder if you can kind of help us make it a little bit clearer, or kind of give us some ideas and inspiration. What's kind of been one of the best or kind of most memorable vision boards that kind of you've seen created? And I wonder if you could just kind of paint us a picture of what was on that, what it looked like. Gave us one example earlier, but yeah, if there's one that kind of really sticks in your memory as being, oh yeah, that was just a really, really good one. Maybe kind of talk us through it a little bit.
Yeah. One of my clients, it's actually a company here based in the States, and their team is several hundred total employees. Some are full-time, some are part-time. And one of them came up to me after one of the live events and said, Steve, I've got my life wheel. I've got all these other goals, but one of my lifelong goals, she at the time was in her early 30s, has been to go on a safari in Africa. And I said, oh, here we go. And her name is Jen. And the first thing I thought of for her was to create a hashtag, something to really just name this pursuit. So I thought, what do you want to do when you're there? She goes, well, I want to go on a safari and I need to see a giraffe live. Giraffes are my favorite animal, and I would just love to see one in person out on the Serengeti. So I thought, okay, giraffe, Africa. She became known as hashtag Giraffrica Jen. And she started to use that hashtag on social media, and she found pictures of a giraffe on the internet, printed them out, put a picture on her vision board. She found a gorgeous picture of a sunset on the plains of the Serengeti. She put that on her vision board. She started to talk not only on her Facebook page, but also in her private group for her clients about this pursuit and how they were all a part of her getting to raise enough money to go on a safari. So we got on a coaching call and I said, how much money is it going to cost? I don't know. I said, all right, here's an action for this week. Call a travel agent and find out how much it'll cost. A week later, she told me $10,000. Great. How long do you think it would take you, besides paying all your bills and pursuing all your other goals, to save $10,000? And she said 2 years. Now, at the time, she was ranked 20-something in sales in her company. And I gave her some tips, and she did the work. She did all the work. I didn't do any magic here. Within 2 years, she had banked the $10,000. She had gone from being ranked 20-something in sales during a pandemic in what had been an in-person event and expo type of business and home parties to going virtual, and she was number 2 in the company in sales 2 years later. She saved all the money, and because she had let everybody know about this, she got inundated with giraffe stuffed animals, a pen and pencil set that had giraffe and other jungle creatures on it on the pens. I sent her 2 stickers for her shower. It was a mama and a baby giraffe that are still there to this day, she told me recently. So every day when she was getting ready for work, she would look and she'd see the mom and the baby giraffe and put her hand over them and said, I'm coming to see you. I'm coming to see you. I'm coming to see you. Every Friday, she would do a live broadcast. And every time she banked another $500, remember the increments, I found a children's coloring book page with a giraffe on it. And it had 10 spots. And I wrote 500, 500, 500, 500, 500, 500. And every time she banked another 500, she would go do a Facebook Live to her client base and her team members. And she would color in the $500 spot. Right. That was her tracking. So that one still lights me up. I still talk to Giraffica Jen a few times a month. And we still talk about that journey. And not only is she going to Africa, COVID delayed it a few times and there were some issues over there. She is going. But she still talks about how it impacted every other area of her life because she was so intent on pursuing creating the best version of herself who would get to enjoy a safari in Africa.
That's very cool. Steve, I don't know about our listeners today, but I'm certainly feeling inspired to go away and create a vision board after this and think about what life's going to be like 12 months from now. It's been a time of a little bit of change in the last few months for me, moving house and kind of new podcast studio and various things. So, it feels like a really good time, certainly for me personally, to try that exercise. And I certainly am looking forward to it. Is there anything important that you think we've missed today that you think our listeners should understand before we start to bring the conversation to a close?
Yeah, one very important thing is, now this again, me recommending, because a lot of people say, well, I want to do an electronic board versus a physical hands-on touch glue stick board. My recommendation is to do the physical board because it engages both sides of your brain and also to do a lot of handwritten notes along the way when you're brainstorming about what you would like to have and create in your life. Because when you're handwriting, it works both sides of your brain, which is very, very integral for creating and hardwiring better habits. Now, when you're done, take a picture of the board and make it the wallpaper on every electronic device you own, because that way you get to see it every day. And what I encourage people to do is also look at the board every single day and pick just one picture, because it can be overwhelming to look at a whole board. Select one goal and ask yourself, what one step can I take today toward this one goal? And slowly the wheels will start to turn. If you're in your car, a lot of times, if you're traveling meeting to meeting, print out a picture of your vision board, fold it up and put it in one of the visors. And every time you stop for a meeting, just say, this meeting is going to get me one step closer to one of these, and take a good look at it. And understand that making the board is only the first step. It's the connections you make, it's the actions you take, and it's the progress that you document along the way. Having a gratitude journal is a great tool to have. I've been writing in mine for over 14 years. Be grateful for the little step you took each day. Now, you can do it at the end of the day before you go to sleep, or what I do is first thing the next morning. I start off my day saying, these are my 3 favorite moments from yesterday. And that lights my fire for the new day. So yeah, just making the board is not quite enough. I've got a meme I send to my clients when I haven't heard from them in a while. It's a skeleton resting its skull on its wrist bones, and it says, waiting for my vision board to work.
Yeah.
So we have to be part of the process ongoing, but don't just make the board. Make it a part of every day.
Excellent. Steve, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your inspiration with us today. It's been such fun chatting. And thank you on behalf of us all. If we're interested in you, your work, where do we go to find more?
You can find me online at stevegamlinspeaker.com, or you can find me on social media. Facebook and LinkedIn are where I spend most of my time. Just my name, Steve Gamlin, Gamlin.
Steve, thank you so much for coming on the Exam Study Expert podcast. It's been a real pleasure chatting, and I hope we'll talk again soon. Well, thank you so much to both of today's guests, Ian Chamandy and Steve Gamlin. Wonderful to hear from you both. Next week, we are sticking with the mindset theme in academia and exploring what I'm sure you'll agree, a very important question of how to be a happy student. That's with Dr. Heather Frederick of the Happy Doc Student podcast. I've known Heather for a short while, about a year or two now. Well, I was fortunate enough to be invited on Heather's podcast, the Happy Doc Student, and had a wonderful time meeting her. We've been trying to find a date ever since for her to come on the Exam Study Expert podcast and talk a little bit about her real passion, which is happiness. Her particular expertise is working with sort of doctoral students and in kind of academics, but really kind of, as she will say, the things she talks about are really applicable to all students, and there's very little in the conversation that's specific to academics or postgraduates. It's really for all students, and really, as Heather would say, it's really for all humans. Really, the advice she talks about is pretty universal for anybody engaged in any kind of pursuit, be it kind of academic or be it pursuing some kind of business or other kind of goal. And she covers some really practical ways to manage things like your stress levels, how to prioritize well, how to turn negative feedback or disappointing results to your advantage, and much more. It's a lot of really good stuff next week. I really hope you'll be able to join me for that. For now, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I want to wish you every success, as always, in your studies.
Wasn't that wonderful? If you're feeling inspired, why not leave us a rating and a review in your podcast app? It would make our day. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon.